Welcome to Lost Relation Chronicles.
Before we start today's story, we would like to inform you that a friend of ours has started a YouTube channel where he has picked up the story, A Sniper's Fight for Survival, and has put up a different version of the story. Please head out to his channel. The link is in the description box. So, head over there and help with a like and a subscribe. Now let's start with today's story. It all began in 2014. Sandra was 27 and I was 26. We had been together for 5 years, married for 2. We met in college. She was studying accounting, and I was studying mechanical engineering. Our first encounter was at a party hosted by a mutual friend. We hit it off almost immediately, and after a few dates, we made it official. A year later, we were married. Sandra had an older sister, Serena, who was married to Arnold, a good friend of hers. But the real challenge came from Sandra's mother, Isabella. She never accepted me. From the beginning, she tried to find any excuse to tear us apart. I could tell she didn't like me, but I never understood why. She would say things like, "Sandra deserves better," or "You're not good enough for her," every chance she got. It was humiliating, and it wore me down, but I thought I had the perfect life. Sandra was incredible, beautiful, smart, and the most stunning woman I had ever met. I had a decent salary as a mechanical engineer, and we were in a good place. We had agreed not to have children right away, wanting to travel and finish paying off the house first. Sandra was on board, and she even began talking about getting a master's degree, which I gladly agreed to pay for. I just wanted her to feel supported. A year after we got married, things took a turn. Sandra's mother, Isabella, had a fall and ended up hospitalized for a couple of days. The doctors said it wasn't serious, but they recommended she take bed rest. Sandra was beside herself with worry. I could see how much her mother's health affected her. She stayed with Isabella during her recovery, and I respected that, though I wished we could have spent more time together. Then came the anniversary party. Sandra's parents were celebrating 30 years of marriage. That night, 2 shocking announcements were made that left me reeling. First, Serena, who had been trying for years to have children, announced that she had been unable to conceive. She had visited countless fertility clinics without success, and the pain of not being able to have children was heartbreaking. I could see the tears in her eyes as she shared the news. It was one of those moments where you wish you could take someone's pain away but realize you can't. The second announcement was from Isabella. I had always known she was emotionally distant, but what she said next hit me like a ton of bricks. With tears in her eyes, she told us all how desperately she longed to become a grandmother. She spoke with such urgency, and her words carried a weight that I hadn't anticipated. A fall could be the end of me, and who knows when it could happen, she said, her voice trembling. I watched her grow up, and now I just want to see her have children. I looked over at Sandra, and I could see the shock on her face. She was pale, her eyes wide, and her hands were trembling as she reached for her glass of wine, but I could tell it wasn't helping. Her mother's words had struck a deep chord with her. After the party, we went home, and Sandra was noticeably affected by everything that had happened. She didn't say much at first, but I could tell she was in her own world, processing the events of the evening. I tried to give her space, but after a while, I couldn't hold back. "Sandra," I said gently, sitting beside her on the couch. "Are you okay?" She looked at me, her eyes full of tears. "I don't know, Alex," she whispered. I just don't know. Is it your mom?" I asked carefully. She nodded, her voice breaking. "She's right, though. She's not going to be around forever. And Serena, she's struggling. I don't know what to do." I reached out, pulling her into a tight hug. "We don't have to make any decisions right now, okay? We'll figure it out. Together." But even as I said those words, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had shifted. I knew Sandra had been affected by her mother's desperate plea for grandchildren, and the weight of it was heavy on her. Something had changed, but I wasn't sure what it meant yet. I chose to ignore the situation, a mistake I now regretted but couldn't seem to face at the time. The weeks went by, the months passing without any more major developments, until one day I received an urgent call from Sandra. Her voice was shaky. "Alex, I'm at the hospital," she said, barely able to hold it together. "It's Serena. She tried to hurt herself." I froze, a knot of fear tightening in my chest. "Are you okay?" I managed to ask, though it didn't make sense. She was the one at the hospital, not me. "I'm okay," she replied quickly. "But she's in critical condition, Alex. I need you here." I didn't hesitate for a second. "I'm on my way," I said, trying to steady my voice. I couldn't let her hear how rattled I was, but I was terrified. My mind raced, trying to piece together how this could have happened. I rushed to the hospital as soon as I finished work, and when I arrived, I found Sandra in the waiting room, her face pale and her eyes swollen from crying. Isabella was there too, standing off to the side with a cold, almost accusatory expression on her face. I immediately felt a tension in the air, like something was off. Isabella's gaze didn't soften when she saw me. It was as if she was blaming me for Serena's breakdown. I approached Sandra and pulled her into a tight hug, trying to reassure her, but I couldn't shake the uncomfortable feeling of Isabella's stare. Arnold, Marco, and Isabella's husband were also in the room, but their presence didn't make the situation any better. They all looked anxious, but it was Isabella's cold demeanor that stuck with me. It felt like the blame was on me, though I couldn't understand why. "What happened?" I asked, my voice low, trying to get some sense of the situation. Sandra's voice trembled. "It's the infertility, Alex. Serena, she's been struggling with it for years. But after Mom's comments about wanting grandchildren, it broke her. The pressure was too much, and she couldn't handle it." I felt a sickening pang in my chest. I couldn't imagine what Serena was going through, but I understood how deeply it must have hurt her. 2 days later, Serena was discharged from the hospital, still shaken but physically okay. The doctors prescribed antidepressants to help her cope with the aftermath, and the whole family gathered at Isabella's house to discuss what had happened. It was tense, the air thick with unspoken words and awkward glances. As we sat in the living room, the topic of grandchildren was raised again. Serena's infertility was still fresh on everyone's mind, and Isabella's words from the party were still echoing in the background. I hesitated for a moment, knowing how controversial it might be, but I felt it was the right thing to suggest. What if you and Arnold consider adoption?" I offered, trying to keep my voice steady. "It could be a good way for you to have a child in your life, even if it's not your biological grandchild. Adoption is a real option, and it could bring a lot of joy." The room went dead silent. I could feel all eyes on me, and I knew that my suggestion wasn't going to be well received, but I pushed forward anyway. Isabella's eyes narrowed, and she looked at me like I just suggested something utterly outrageous. "Adopt a child?" she said sharply. "That's not the same as having a grandchild of our own blood. A child born from our family. A real grandchild." Her words hit like a slap in the face, and I tried to hide my frustration. I wasn't suggesting it because I didn't understand the importance of family. I was suggesting it because I knew it could give Serena and Arnold the chance to create the family they longed for. But Isabella wasn't hearing any of it. The conversation faltered after that. There were no more suggestions, no more ideas. The tension in the room was palpable, and I could feel it pressing down on me, suffocating me. We all left shortly after, and I could tell from Sandra's silence that she was as frustrated as I was. In the weeks that followed, things began to change. Serena and Arnold started visiting our house more often, though their presence felt strange. They would arrive, and I could hear them talking in hushed voices in the kitchen, but as soon as they entered the living room, they fell silent. There was something off about their behavior, something that felt uncomfortable and hidden. I couldn't shake the feeling that they were keeping something from me, something I wasn't supposed to know, but I wasn't sure what it was, and that uncertainty made everything feel even more unsettling. I decided not to pay much attention to it at first. Maybe Serena was just going through a tough time and needed to lean on her sister. But then, something changed. Sandra started acting different. She became more reserved with her phone, often hiding it when I walked into the room. When I tried to get close to her after work, she pulled away, and our intimate life, which had always been strong, started to fade. The disconnect between us grew, but I couldn't put my finger on what exactly was wrong. Then came July 5th, a day I'll never forget. I came home from work, and as soon as I turned onto our street, I saw several cars parked outside the house. My heart sank. I had no idea what was going on, but something felt off. I rushed inside, only to find my in-laws, Serena and her husband, Arnold, all sitting in the living room. Their expressions were grave, and Sandra was the first to speak. "Sit down. We need to talk," she said, her voice tight. I looked around at the gathered faces, all of them watching me as if they were waiting for something. My heart raced. "What's going on?" I asked, but before I could say more, my mother-in-law, Isabella, cut me off. "What solution can you give us?" she demanded, her voice sharp. I blinked, confused. "What are you talking about?" Isabella's eyes narrowed, and she glanced at Sandra before responding. "About your grandchildren," she said coldly, her words slicing through the air. I felt a wave of frustration and confusion. I don't understand," I stammered. Without waiting for an answer, I tried to suggest something that had been on my mind for a while. Maybe we should look into in vitro fertilization? I know it's not a guarantee, but it could help." But Isabella's reaction was immediate, her face twisting in disgust. Her age-old judgment was clear, and I could see that my suggestion didn't sit well with her at all. She shook her head with a certain finality. No, she muttered, almost to herself. Then she looked up, her eyes gleaming with some sort of cruel resolution. "I have another solution." I stared at her, my mind racing. What could possibly be her idea? I looked at Sandra for some kind of reassurance, but she wasn't looking at me. Instead, her gaze was fixed on Serena, then back to her mother. I turned my attention to Serena, who was smiling. Her husband, Arnold, sat next to her, his smug grin almost too much to bear. He leaned back in his chair with an air of superiority that I couldn't ignore. The tension in the room was suffocating, and I had no idea what was coming next. I stayed silent, waiting for Sandra to speak, but she just sat there, looking at the floor, her face unreadable. Suddenly, Sandra snapped. "Idiot! Say something." Her words hit like a slap to the face, and I flinched, not fully understanding why she was so angry. I didn't respond immediately, trying to process what was happening. The silence stretched on, suffocating. And then Isabella, with a calmness that made my blood run cold, spoke again. "As you know, dear," she began, addressing Sandra, "Serena has been cursed with the impossibility of giving us grandchildren. That joy of motherhood that she cannot experience." Her voice trailed off, dripping with judgment. Sandra interrupted her mother sharply. "We've looked into other options," she explained, her voice tight with something I couldn't place. "But surrogacy, it's risky. The genetic and hereditary issues that could arise in future generations." She shook her head, looking exhausted. Arnold, never one to stay quiet for long, chimed in. "Surrogacy is expensive. We can't afford it. Not with all the other expenses a child would require." I was barely keeping up, but I wasn't going to let them dismiss me like this. "So, what are you proposing?" I asked, trying to steady my voice, even though everything inside me was starting to spiral. That's when Isabella's words struck like a thunderclap. "Since you refuse to have children, Sandra will become pregnant with Arnold." I froze. The world seemed to stop around me. My heart pounded in my chest, and I felt the blood drain from my face as the gravity of her words hit me all at once. Pregnant with Arnold. Sandra, my wife, and Arnold, my brother-in-law. I looked at her, but she wouldn't meet my gaze. Instead, she kept her eyes trained on the floor, the silence between us now thicker than ever. Pregnant with Arnold. I couldn't think, couldn't breathe. I swallowed hard, unable to utter a word. I hoped this was some sick joke, but I quickly realized it wasn't. My mother-in-law continued to speak, her voice steady, as if what she was saying was perfectly reasonable. "We understand that you don't want to take care of the baby," she said coldly. "Don't worry. When it's born, we'll register it in the name of Serena and Arnold." I could feel the blood draining from my face. I was in shock, and I just wanted to wake up from whatever nightmare this had become. But my mother-in-law wasn't done. She went on, as if the horror she just dropped on me hadn't been enough. "Children are not products," she said, her tone sanctimonious. "They are not made in a laboratory. They must be conceived with love, the fruit of a couple. In other words, with coitus. Her words hung in the air, each one more suffocating than the last. She went on to cite religious arguments, referencing the church's prohibition against artificial means of conception and her desire to prevent her grandchild from being condemned to hell. I couldn't listen to it anymore. I couldn't stand being in this room, surrounded by these people, and hearing this insanity spew out of her mouth. Before she could continue, I stood up abruptly, my fists clenched at my sides, and I shouted, "No way!" I didn't usually raise my voice like that, but I couldn't hold it in. I needed to make them understand. "Sandra, what do you want to tell me?" I asked my wife, my voice raw with frustration. Sandra looked at me, her expression flickering between confusion and fear. She didn't speak. She didn't say anything, and it hit me harder than anything else. She wasn't on my side. She wasn't defending me. Isabella, my mother-in-law, looked at me defiantly. She was clearly taken aback by my outburst, but instead of backing down, she tried to explain herself, as if I should somehow understand. I wasn't having it. Arnold, who had been quiet up until this point, approached me and tried to place a hand on my shoulder. "Don't touch me," I snapped, stepping back, my anger boiling over. "Look, we respect your decision not to have children," my mother-in-law said, her tone more patronizing than ever. "But I understand that you're still young, and you still have the urge to explore. Therefore, Arnold will be the one to take care of it." I froze. What? My mind couldn't wrap itself around what she was saying. She continued, "Serena agrees that her son should be conceived in the act of love. Therefore, it will be between Sandra and Arnold." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The words were impossible, and that's when I finally snapped. "You're crazy, old witch," I shouted, my voice cracking with fury. Everyone in the room fell silent. It felt like time stopped. Serena gasped. Sandra's face twisted in anger, but there was something behind it. Regret? Maybe guilt? I couldn't tell. Arnold, who had been silent until now, looked at me with a smirk. "Come on," he said, his tone condescending. "It will be fun." And that was it. I don't even remember moving, but in a split second, I launched myself at Arnold, my fist connecting with his face in a punch that knocked him to the ground. The room erupted in chaos. Serena screamed, and Sandra joined her. The sound of their shouts echoed in my ears, but I couldn't focus on anything except the surge of adrenaline coursing through me. "Get out of my house," I yelled, my voice hoarse from the rage. I didn't wait for them to respond. I turned and stormed into the bedroom, locking the door behind me. I could hear them shouting from the other side of the house. Moments later, I saw them leaving through the window. The door slammed open, and Sandra walked in, her face flushed with anger. But there was something else. Hurt? I didn't care. "You offended my mother," she shouted, her voice trembling with emotion. She ignored the fact that they had just tried to convince me to let her sleep with Arnold. She didn't care about that. I couldn't stay quiet anymore. "You're ignoring the fact that they're trying to manipulate me into letting you have sex with your brother-in-law." I shot back, my voice hoarse from shouting. Sandra didn't respond. She just glared at me, clearly seething. She didn't speak to me for the rest of the day. That night, after I'd spent the entire day with my best friend, Elliot, I came home. Elliot had been my rock, listening to me vent and offering words of support. "This is deception, Alex. Your mother-in-law is the one who's to blame for all of this," he said, shaking his head. I nodded, feeling the weight of everything crash down on me again. Elliot was right. My mother-in-law was at the center of all this madness. Elliot suggested something that sounded crazy at the time, but made sense in retrospect. He said, "Maybe it's time to leave the city, Alex. Take Sandra, get away from all this mess. The less you're around her family, the less their influence on you both." I'd been thinking about it for days, trying to figure out how to make everything stop hurting. It wasn't a bad idea, but I wasn't sure I was ready to run away from my problems. But then I thought about it. Being away from her family, away from all the pressure. It sounded like something I needed, even if I didn't want to admit it. When I arrived home that evening, Sandra was sitting at the kitchen table, her face red and blotchy. She had been crying. I stopped in my tracks when I saw her. My stomach churned with guilt, but I didn't know what to say. "Sandra?" My voice came out softer than I intended. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears. "My mom's been hospitalized," she said, her voice trembling. "She's in critical condition. I didn't even think before responding, that old bitch can die. And I hope the death is agonizingly painful for her." The words just came out, bitter and cold. I knew I hurt her, but I couldn't stop myself. It wasn't my proudest moment. Sandra collapsed into herself, breaking down completely. I watched her for a moment, my heart sinking. I didn't mean to be so harsh, but I had been bottling everything up for so long that it just spilled out. "It wasn't my intention to hurt you, but your bitch of a mother leaves me with little respect for her," I said. She wiped her tears away and looked at me. "You don't understand, Alex," she whispered. "Serena, she's still so depressed. I'm afraid she'll hurt herself again." Serena's mental health was a mess, and I couldn't pretend to know how to handle it. I stayed silent for a moment before saying, "We can try. We'll try to have a baby soon. Our baby, your and mine." I didn't want to say it, but I did. I had no other choice. Sandra looked at me, her face lighting up. She smiled softly. "It's okay," she said, her voice relieved. "We'll try soon." But deep down, I knew it wasn't just about making Sandra happy. It was about keeping the peace with her family, and that didn't sit right with me. Still, I couldn't back out now, not when she looked at me with such hope. Days passed without incident, but something about Sandra had changed. She was more affectionate, more loving, and somehow less distant. Her attitude softened, and she didn't hide her phone from me anymore. I caught her smiling at me randomly, and it was like I was falling in love with her all over again. But there was something off, something that I couldn't put my finger on. It was strange. I just didn't trust it. 6 months passed, and somehow, I found myself in a deeper relationship with Sandra than I had ever expected. I didn't know how it happened, but I was more in love with her than I had been before. Whatever she wanted, I gave it to her. If she asked for a new TV, I bought it. If she wanted a day at the spa, I booked it. I don't know why I did it. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was the desire to make up for the pain I had caused. But no matter what, Sandra's happiness became my priority. Isabella, my mother-in-law, had stopped pushing for grandchildren, and Serena seemed to be improving, both of which were things I hadn't expected. I didn't know whether it was the baby talk or just time, but I was glad the pressure had finally eased. And then, I had a surprise planned for Sandra, something I'd been saving up for, something to show her how much I cared, how much I wanted to make things right between us. I'd been thinking about it for a while, and I knew it would be the perfect way to hit the reset button for us. On February 20th, I walked through the door, my hands gripping the tickets tightly. When I arrived home that day, the house was eerily quiet. My first thought was that maybe Sandra had just stepped out for a moment, but as I made my way upstairs, something felt off. I reached the bedroom and saw a note lying on the bed. My heart sank as I picked it up, recognizing Sandra's handwriting. "Alex, you see that nothing in our relationship changes. I love you more than ever, and I know you do too. My mother has become more affectionate with you. She appreciates you in her own way. However, Serena cannot be happy, and I know that the guilt of not giving her a grandchild is destroying her. I hadn't told you, but I know you're going to understand. You've changed a lot in these months, and I know you're mature enough and you love me too much. My parents, Serena, and Arnold will do what we planned 6 months ago. Today, we are leaving town. I will get pregnant by Arnold. I will not tell you where we are because I know you, and I should not suffer stressful situations, and neither should Arnold. Serena told me that he gets nervous, and maybe we can't conceive on the first try. That's why we'll be gone for a month. Don't bother looking for us. I will return when I am pregnant. This does not change our relationship. We will pretend that nothing happened. No one in the family knows, and that's how it will stay. Just between us." I stood there, frozen, unable to process what I had just read. I felt this overwhelming sadness and humiliation rush over me. I won't deny it. It hurt more than anything ever had before. But in that moment, I realized something. There was no trust in this relationship, no mutual agreement. And it was all for the sake of her mother's demands. I was angry, but more than anything, I was ashamed of myself. Sandra had walked all over me, and her mother was orchestrating everything from the shadows, as always. I had been so naive to believe that any of it was real, to think that Sandra really cared about me the way she said she did. Eventually, the sadness turned into something else, indifference. 2 days later, I came to a realization I hadn't known before. The sheer manipulation of some people. Sandra and her mother had twisted things around so skillfully that I was the one left in the dark. They made me feel like the obedient husband who forgave everything, and I hated myself for allowing it. But not anymore. I couldn't let them continue walking all over me. I wasn't that man anymore. I couldn't just stay silent. I drove to Sandra's parents' house, my mind racing with everything I was about to confront. I wanted answers, even if I didn't know what the hell I was going to say. When I got there, I saw their cars were gone. It was exactly as the note had said. They were already gone. The feeling of humiliation only deepened. They had planned this so carefully, so secretly. I felt sick. I went back home, frustrated and humiliated, my mind still reeling. I picked up the phone and called Elliot. He answered after a few rings. "Hey, man," he said, his voice full of concern. "What happened? You okay?" I took a deep breath. "No, I'm not okay. Sandra's gone. They took off like we were never even married. She's gone to get pregnant by Arnold and I stopped myself before I could go any further. What was the point?" Elliot let out a heavy sigh. "Man, that's messed up. That's a hell of a betrayal. What are you going to do?" I didn't have an answer for him. I just felt so lost. "I don't know, Elliot. I honestly don't know." We cracked open a couple of beers, just sitting there in silence for a while, the weight of it all sinking in. After a few more drinks, he finally asked again, "What are you going to do, man? For real?" I didn't even look at him. My eyes were glued to the table in front of me, the bottle of beer in my hand now warm. "Nothing," I said quietly. "I'm not doing anything. I don't even want to look for her. I just want it all to be over." Later that night, I tried calling Sandra, but when I checked the phone, I saw she'd left it behind. I wasn't surprised. I knew she'd done it on purpose. It was just another thing to keep me from reaching her, from getting answers. I picked up her phone and checked the messages. Everything seemed normal. Nothing out of the ordinary. Conversations with her family, updates on her mother's condition. It was all so damn fake. That weekend, I did nothing but stew in my anger. It ate away at me, growing worse with every passing minute. The betrayal, the manipulation, it only solidified my hatred for Sandra and her family. I didn't know if I could ever look at any of them the same way again. I couldn't believe it. My wife, Sandra, had been cheating on me with her brother-in-law, Arnold, for months. The excuse they used, that he was too nervous to conceive, was a complete joke. They had been scheming behind my back, and I was done. It was time to get out, to disappear from their toxic mess. So, I made a plan. I bought tickets to Canada, packed all my things, and sold my car. The house was on lease, and it was paid for the next 6 months. I sold most of the important electronics in cash, emptied all mine and joint accounts. I was not leaving her with a single penny. The cards were canceled. The insurances were changed. I cut Sandra out completely. I had enough money saved to live for 3 months. To make sure I could pull this off, I asked Elliot for a loan. He didn't hesitate and told me to take care of myself. "Whatever you need, man. Just keep me in the loop," he said. I knew I could count on him. I took Sandra's phone with me, and before I left, I quit my job and made it clear that I didn't want to hear from anyone, including my wife. The betrayal was too much. 3 weeks into my new life in Canada, I got a WhatsApp notification on Sandra's phone. It was from a family group chat titled Baby. I hesitated, but curiosity got the better of me. I opened the message and saw something that made my heart sink. It was Serena's message. "It's finally happened, family. After more than 20 attempts, we will finally have a grandchild." I clicked on the photo Serena had shared. Arnold was smiling, standing beside Sandra, who was lying in bed. She was wearing nothing but her underwear, and I could tell they had just been intimate. The next image was of a pregnancy test. Sandra was pregnant. By Arnold. I felt my world collapse. I could hardly believe what I was seeing. The anger, the sadness, the humiliation. It was overwhelming. But I was too far away now, in Canada, and I knew there was no turning back. I couldn't be near her again, not after everything that had happened. The messages kept coming in. Congratulations. From Serena. We finally did it. From Arnold. And my wife, Sandra, was in the middle of it all, living a life I couldn't even recognize. I tried to push it out of my mind. I started looking for work in Canada, anything to distract me. Luckily, my engineering skills and knowledge of languages helped me land a job at a small factory as a warehouse worker. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough to survive, and it was better than being surrounded by the lies of my past life. A week after I started the job, I woke up on a Sunday morning to a message from Sandra on my phone. It said, "Love, I'm home. Everything went well, and I'm pregnant. Come soon. I have something to tell you." I stared at the message for a while. The audacity. After everything, she still thought I would just come running back to her. I didn't respond. I spent the day walking around Toronto, trying to clear my mind, not wanting to think about her or the mess I had left behind. But then, more messages came in. "Darling, come home. We need to talk about this. Also, the accounts are empty and the cards don't work. I need money for grocery." I ignored those two. Her brother-in-law and that old bitch can take care of her on their own money, not mine. I kept walking, trying to find some peace, but Sandra's persistence was like a thorn in my side. The calls started coming in next. I saw her name, Serena's, and Arnold's flashing on my phone. I just kept rejecting them. The messages and calls didn't stop. All afternoon, I could feel my phone buzzing with notifications. They kept reaching out, Sandra, Serena, Arnold, pleading with me. But I couldn't bring myself to care anymore. That's when I received a call from my father. I wasn't expecting it, but his voice on the other end of the line caught me off guard. "Alex," he said, his voice tense, "we need to talk about this. Your mother's worried about you. Why are you doing this? Why are you ignoring Sandra?" I didn't know what to say. I hadn't even spoken to him in weeks. "Dad, just stay out of it. I can't do this anymore. I'm done with all of them." He was quiet for a moment. "Alex, this is a family matter. Don't make any rash decisions. You need to come home." Home? I thought. The home they destroyed? I didn't want to go back. But my father, ever the voice of reason, kept pushing. "Son, think about what you're doing. Your mother wants to help you through this. We can fix things." Fix things? There was nothing to fix. Sandra had made her choice, and so had I. I wasn't going back to that. I ended the call, but the message was clear. Even my father was trying to get involved now. It had been days since I'd spoken to anyone in my family, and I wasn't expecting him to reach out so soon. Then 2 days later he called again. This time, I explained the entire situation to my father, from the betrayal to the message Sandra had left me. Then I shared the images of the WhatsApp chat with him. At first, he seemed incredulous, like he couldn't quite believe what I was saying. "You're telling me she was with Arnold? Your brother-in-law?" he asked, sounding almost confused. "Yes," I said firmly. "She's pregnant by him." "It's true." There was a long silence before my father spoke again. I can't believe this, that bitch." "Alex, stick to your decision. You're better off without her." "I am with you, son. Screw that old mother-in-law and screw that bitch wife of yours. I got your back. If they call again, I will deal with them my way." "Yeah, I know," I replied. "I'm not going back. I don't want to deal with them anymore." I told him that I'd be bringing him to Canada as soon as I could and asked him to block Sandra from contacting him. I didn't want anything more to do with that side of the family. For the next 15 days, I turned off my phone. I didn't want to hear from anyone, Sandra, her family, anyone. I bought a new phone once I was settled in Canada, and I set all my social media accounts to private. I didn't bother removing Sandra or her family from my friends list. I just hid them. I didn't need their messages haunting me anymore. One day, I received a message from Elliot, my closest friend. He told me that Sandra had gone to see him, desperate for answers. "She showed up at my door." "Alex," Elliot said. "She asked where you were." I told her she could have asked you herself while she was busy screwing her brother-in-law. Then I closed the door on her and threatened to call the police. Hearing that made me feel a little better. It was a small sense of justice, knowing that someone had stood up to Sandra on my behalf. Elliot said she was a mess, and I wasn't surprised. She had messed up, and now she had to face the consequences. After about 2 weeks, I turned my phone back on, but what I saw made my stomach turn. Over 100 messages and missed calls. Most of them were from Sandra. Her messages were full of pleas. "Alex, please, I still love you. This means nothing. I want to give you your first child. This is for my sister. Don't ignore me. Please answer. I love you." Her voice in the audio recording sounded broken, desperate, but I wasn't moved. I'd made my decision. Then there were the messages from my mother-in-law. She was furious with me. She called me irresponsible and accused me of being selfish. Her messages told me that I could ruin her grandchild's future, that Sandra was losing weight because of the stress. The doctors had to hospitalize her for a nervous breakdown. I didn't care. I blocked her number without hesitation. I didn't respond to anyone, and as the days went by, I began to heal. My father moved in with me, and it was a relief to have him here. He was adjusting to life in Canada, and thankfully, he was doing well. I found a better job that paid well to live comfortably. Things were starting to look up for the first time in a long time. And after some time, I finally achieved something I had never expected: permanent residency in Canada. Now, I had built a new life for myself, from the ground up. After hiring a good lawyer, things started to settle. I filed for divorce and Sandra was served soon. We had shared her handwritten note as part of the divorce petition, stating that she willingly abandoned the marriage. He also shared the WhatsApp messages as part of the evidences. My lawyer fought for the dissolution of marriage rather than a simple divorce. Sandra kept sending messages, but it felt like nothing more than noise. A few months later, I found out that, unfortunately, that Sandra had a miscarriage and the child was lost. Isabella tried to blame me for causing it by giving Sandra depression by abandoning her. Sandra had cut ties with her own family, blaming them for pressuring her into having a child with Arnold. It seemed like she was trying to absolve herself of any responsibility, but I knew better. Despite everything, she kept trying to find out where I was, kept trying to reach out. She thought I'd come back to her, but I wasn't about to fall for it again. Then, one day, I got a video call from her. I wasn't sure why I answered, maybe to see how she was, maybe to see if there was anything left in her that resembled the woman I once knew. But when I saw her, I barely recognized her. She looked worn out. Her face aged in a way that wasn't just physical, but emotional too. It was clear that the guilt and the consequences of her actions were starting to weigh on her. She immediately tried to apologize, but I wasn't having it. I kept my camera off, not wanting her to see my face, not wanting to let her think there was any possibility of reconciliation. I told her, "This will be brief. The sum of your actions defines who you are. You made a decision without me, something you knew I didn't agree with. You confused my love with obedience, and that's something I won't allow. Maybe, by now we would have been expecting a child, but patience is a virtue, and you failed to cultivate it. As for your bitch mother, Isabella, she hasn't passed away, and I doubt she will anytime soon, and honestly, I pray that when her time comes, she dies in agony. I promise you this, that when she dies, I will come back and piss on her grave. You and your bitch mother killed my marriage, and you'll carry that on your conscience forever." I paused, letting it sink in before finishing. "As for me, I have started dating, and soon I will move on from you. I will not forget you, and I will make sure that till I die, I will never forgive you. Also, I hope your mother dies without seeing any of her grandchildren. You reap what you sow. I'm reaping mine, and you're reaping yours." I heard her break down in tears, and I couldn't help but feel a little detached. Then she said that the doctors told her that she will not be able to conceive ever again as, during her operation, her uterus was removed. That was something I did not expect, and honestly, I did not wish such bad karma on her. But it wasn't my responsibility anymore. I ended the call without another word. That was the last time I heard from her. That was around 2019. I've been living in Montreal since then, recovering from that life, from that woman, from all of it. It hasn't been easy, but it's been necessary. The divorce went on fine, and I was free from her. We did not have much to be split, and I was asked to pay alimony for 1 year. Then the world shut down in 2020, and everything seemed to blur together. Days blended into each other, and I didn't know what was real anymore. But honestly, it doesn't matter. It feels like something out of a story now, like fiction, and I wish it wasn't. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.